Come on, I'm right-handed, but it's this corner. Oh, come on. And action. Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie. I can be found on Ravelry and Instagram at Billie Toy. I'm going to put it here for you to see the correct spelling of it. Today, we're going to talk about a variety of things, including some knitting. And after I go through my knitting, stick around because I'm going to talk about some women who featured significantly in history. I only have one finished object. This is it. I did finish the gray baby sweater for my cousin Gray. I think I showed it to you, but just in case, I'm going to insert a picture so you can see it finished with the darling little buttons on it. And maybe before I publish this episode, I'll even have a picture of the baby wearing it. I'm working on getting that. But anyway, yes, this is the beret from my beret knit along. I had an entire ball left over from when I knit this sweater. You might remember the Elsa Schiaparelli bow knot sweater that I did also as a knit along. Let me stand up to show you in case you've forgotten the bow. So I had an entire leftover ball, enough to do two strands held together to give me the stiffness in a beret that I like. And I thought I may as well use that up. I do have a beautiful hat. I'll put a picture here of when I was in Paris wearing the hat and the sweater when I went to see the original of the sweater in an exhibit. I'll also give a link to that episode. So next I wanted to get to my major work in progress at the moment. I have a copy of the original pattern, but the pattern was also featured in this book by Linda Ivel, who I interviewed. And again, I will put a link up here for you. From her Tyrolean knitwear. This is the pattern that I'm currently working on. Most of the people on Ravelry who have done this have done it in a light color, but of course, I never like to do anything the way anybody else does it. So I decided to make mine long sleeve and in a dark color. I think you've seen parts of it before. I believe I showed you one of the sleeves before. This was not the first sleeve I knit. This one, I just pulled the needle out of these last few stitches because I may want to make some adjustments to the length of it once I try and baste it into the front and the back of the sweater. But this was the first sleeve that I knit. Here's the cuff. And then there's going to be this interesting shape that will give a sort of a, not a puff shoulder, but a squared, a very 1940s shaped shoulder. So there's that tab that sticks up. And then this will get stitched to there. Don't mind this. I was experimenting with duplicate stitch. I wanted to see how it was going to look. And I have already basted this sleeve using yellow yarn so that I could try it on and make sure it's well fitting. So both sleeves are done. And although it looks like I knit both the fronts at the same time, I did not. I knit one and held it up to that template that I had shown you that I made out of brown paper bag. But this is the section for the collar. And I already put the green stitching through, just so I could make sure I liked how it looked. This is the center front. the underarm. Again, I checked the shaping to my template, seems to have just the right shape. And the ribbing at the bottom. I'm doing this on a size 5 needle. The ribbing was done on size 3. And when I got to here and it switches to this seed stitch, I'm not sure the light is catching that well. Here it's stockinette and intarsia, but up here it's seed stitch. When I got to here and I measured, it was going to be too wide for my shoulders. So I dropped down to the size 3 needle. And I'm hoping that I'm going to have a narrow shoulder to accommodate the width of my shoulder. We'll see. I mean, I think it looks right. I have an unusually narrow shoulder. I think I'm 13 and a half inches from shoulder to shoulder. And even though this pattern is written for, I think, a 34-inch bust, I'll check that in a second, the shoulders are still too wide for me. So I had to do a little bit of adjusting in here, which is why my edge looks a little bit uneven. That will be accommodated for when I stitch in the sleeve. At the moment, the back of my intarsia looks like this. I don't want to weave in the ends until I'm really sure that everything is the right size, because if I do have to rip back any part of it, having all these ends woven in would make that virtually impossible. So it's a little bit messy at the moment, but it will get better. I also experimented with making a little French knot here. Not what the pattern calls for, but I'm improvising. Now, the whole back of the sweater will be my design. I'm going to put a motif on it. Maybe I'll show you some of the ideas that I'm tinkering around with, and maybe you'd like to comment and weigh in. First, let me check what size the original was in to fit a 34 to 35-inch bust. And she says 36 to 38 inches given in brackets. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, because the original pattern is only in one size. But she may have seen somebody else adapted, or she may have adapted it herself. She does say a version for an even larger size is given in yet another book. She says exactly what I figured out on my own, using smaller needles to do the moss stitch. I suppose back then maybe they put shoulder pads in, which I could do. They wanted a really exaggerated shoulder, but I'm so narrow that when I do their width, it's just sort of flopping down on me. I've had that experience with other sweaters, so know thyself. So I'm planning to do on the back of the sweater some kind of a Russian nested doll motif. And I really thought that I would like to do something very intricate. I'm not sure that I want to do it in stranded knitting, because I think there are too many colors. I'm toying with the idea of doing duplicate stitch, like stitching over the tops of each stitch, but even that could be overwhelming, which is why I experimented with just half a dozen stitches or so on the sleeve to see how cumbersome is this going to be? And am I going to get something that looks beautiful, or am I going to get something that looks really novice and unappealing? So this is one motif that I came up with. Later on in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Sonia Delaunay. This is kind of the style of her flowers that I freely borrowed from, and then some motifs from some of the beautiful Art Deco buildings in Manhattan where I live. The Channon Building, the Chrysler Building. Actually, let me show you that too. One sec. Here are some gates from the Channon Building. Here's some more motifs from the facade of the Channon Building. It's one of the really beautiful Art Deco buildings in New York. It's not famous like the Chrysler Building, shown here. Most people have seen pictures of this, and I love this building very, very much. It was a little hard for me to get this motif in a way that looked neat and tidy. Here's another concept I had to do some really beautiful flowers and this intricate fair isle kind of patterning. But I'm inclined to go Art Deco since it's a 1940s sweater. So you'll just have to come back in future episodes and see what I ultimately design and knit. I do think I'm going to stick with some intarsia to block in big sections of the color and then do some of the finer work in duplicate stitch. Here's a look at the Klaus Porto soap packaging designed, I think, in the 20s or 30s by Sonia Delaunay that served as inspiration for the flowers that I'm considering. Later on in this episode, I'm going to show you the inside of the fabulous New York store for this brand of soap that's made in Portugal. I have varying amounts of these different colors of yarn left over from my Fair project, the Genie, which I've spoken so often about. And I was really hoping to be able to incorporate some, if not all of these, into the motif on the back of this black sweater. But then I decided that might be very busy, very crazy, and I really want to kind of keep it Art Deco and streamlined, kind of simple. I think, I mean, for right now, I just was not feeling these colors. I am going to try and stay with the colors that I'm using here. So yellow, the green, the red, and the hot pink. Can you see how perfect those buttons are? They're green with little flowers on them. I would love to be able to find a perfect button like that. If you have any in your grandma's button box, let me know. I'll buy them off you. I am imagining a green button to pick up the green from this. Although really any of these colors would work. I think green would just be just right. You might remember when I did the VKL recap episode that I picked up a pattern on a small project bag that I could give away as a prize. And I did a drawing last time and the person never contacted me. So I've done yet another drawing and the winner is right here. So if your handle is Jamie Throgmorton 2540, please comment here and we'll figure out a way to get in touch with one another. This month is Women's History Month. And I wanted to honor a couple of female designers. The Metropolitan Museum of Art just did a whole exhibit on women designing for women. But I also wanted to mention that Bard Graduate Center currently has an exhibition on Sonia Delaunay. And I went to see that exhibit truly wonderful. If you're in New York and you could get to see it, it shows so many different aspects of her designing career, not just textiles and clothing, but artwork and toy boxes and jewelry, mosaics. In French and European fashion centers, the right of women to dress women was a slowly earned privilege. Male tailors dominated the industry until the advocacy of Parisian seamstresses led to the establishment of the first French guild for women dressmakers in 1675. European women continued to fight for expanded opportunities in the field. By the start of the 19th century, the guild system was abolished entirely. This deregulation and the appeal of fashion as one of the few trades available to women catalyzed a rise in female dressmakers, milliners, and seamstresses. In the United States, where the vocation was seen as a natural extension of domestic responsibilities, dressmaking came to be regarded as an inherently feminine occupation, and it was increasingly categorized as women's work throughout Western culture. With some exceptions, most dressmakers served a local clientele and had few opportunities for recognition within a system that rarely acknowledged or elevated the work of individuals. Most surviving garments that date prior to the 1850s contain few links that trace them definitively to their creators. The practice of labeling garments began with the emergence of the eponymous couture house in the mid-19th century. Since then, artistic achievements in fashion have often been attributed to a single maker. Yet, design is a collective endeavor. Most garments are the product of multiple hands, from textile mill workers to pattern makers, seamstresses, to embroiderers.
So you can take the elevator or the stairs and meet me in the room that's directly above this one. Left at the landing. Yes, just one more. Sheets of color would be applied, and that would be used to kind of create the same thing over and over and over again. But this isn't a story kind of like the wood blocks, where it is reproducible, but it's still very laborious and time consuming.
She worked in every type of medium. In fact, years ago, I had gone to a shop in New York called Klaus Porto. They sell soap. She designed the packaging, I think back in the 20s or 30s, for the soap, and they still use the design today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the color pink. I'm listening to an audiobook that was recommended by one of you called The Secret Lives of Color. And since Elsa Schiaparelli was so known for her shocking pink, she named the color shocking and designed a perfume to bear that name. I did a whole episode on that too, and I'll leave a link for that as well. But in The Secret Lives of Color, she does mention Schiaparelli and shocking pink, which led me down a rabbit hole. I started looking at different shades of pink, and I found this Wikipedia page that I wanted to share with you when I was researching a color mentioned in the book called Mountbatten Pink. I happened to stumble upon this on Wikipedia, shades of pink. Who knew? It's not in an article about pink in general. It's at the bottom of this article on Mountbatten Pink. But since I stumbled upon it, I thought, well, why not share it? It's so fascinating. So here you can see shocking pink. That's the Schiaparelli color. My pink is pretty close, actually, now that I see it. And here's Mountbatten pink, heliotrope, coral pink, piggy pink. The names are great. Rose veil, ultra pink, hot pink over here, pale dogwood. You can spend quite a bit of time looking over this. Great place to look for nail colors or lip colors. I changed my lipstick recently. This is not my newest one, but I'm usually like a red gal, but I found a new one that is a little bit more scarlet than what I normally wear. So be on the lookout. You'll see that in future episodes. Anyway, here's a bunch of pinks. Seashell, that's so pretty. Think pink. Since you seem to enjoy my reading to you about Ella Fitzgerald and Memorex, I wanted to read you a small excerpt from this book pertaining to pink. Known to Winston and Clementine Churchill as the Imbroglio, Daisy Fellows was a very shocking woman indeed. Born in Paris in the dog days of the 19th century, she was the only daughter of a French aristocrat and Isabel Blanche Singer, the sewing machine heiress. In the 1920s and 30s, she was a notorious transatlantic bad girl, dosing her ballet teacher with cocaine, editing the French Harper's Bazaar, carrying on a succession of high-profile affairs, and throwing parties to which she only invited pairs of mortal enemies. She was, according to an artist acquaintance, the beautiful Madame de Pompadour of the period, dangerous as an albatross. To Mitchell Owens, a writer for the New York Times, she was a Molotov cocktail in a mamboche suit. One of her numerous vices was shopping, and it was one of her purchases from Cartier that unleashed the scandalous shade of pink onto the world. The bright pink Tête de Bélier, or ram's head, a 17.47 carat diamond, had once belonged to Russian royalty. Fellows wore it one day when meeting one of her favorite designers, the inventive surrealist couturier Elsa Schiaparelli. Fellows was one of the only two women brave enough to wear the infamous high-heel hat designed in collaboration with Salvador Dali. Schiaparelli herself was the other. It was love at first sight. The color flashed in front of my eyes, Schiaparelli later wrote. Bright, impossible, impudent, becoming, life-giving, like all the lights and the birds and the fish in the world together. Color of China and Peru, but not of the West, a shocking color, pure and undiluted. She immediately incorporated it into the packaging of her first perfume, released in 1937. The bottle, designed by the surrealist painter Leonore Fini, was modeled after the voluptuous torso of the actress Mae West and came in a distinctive hot pink case. Its name, of course, was shocking. The color became something of a touchstone for the designer, cropping up again and again in her collections and even in her own interior decoration. Her granddaughter, the model and actress Marissa Berenson, remembers Schiaparelli's bed being covered with heart-shaped, shocking pink pillows. Age has not dimmed the color's appeal. In the brash 1980s, Christian Lacroix often paired it with bright red. Most, however, use it only sparingly. A notable exception can be found in the film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. In 1953, the costume designer William Travilla was urgently called to the set. The filmmakers were panicking about its star, Marilyn Monroe, as a nude calendar featuring the actress had just been released and the press was in a slavering uproar. The studio decided her assets needed to be more jealously guarded. I made a very covered dress, Travilla later wrote, a very famous pink dress with a big bow in the back. It is this outfit Monroe wears when singing the tune that helped seal her place in Hollywood's firmament. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. No doubt, Daisy Fellows, by then a determinedly soignée 63-year-old, wholeheartedly agreed. Here's Marilyn Monroe. I just showed you this picture in conjunction with my Oscars episode, which if you haven't seen, I'll leave a link for it here. I looked for a picture of this pink diamond and I wasn't able to find it, sadly. The high heel hat. I've seen that hat in an exhibition. Maybe I've seen it twice, actually, in New York and in Paris. I'll put a picture of that here. That's it for this week. I'll be back in the not too distant future with a little bit more on Women's History Month. And of course, some more knitting as I tear into the rest of the project and a couple of other things that are also on my needles that have not gotten much love lately. See you next time, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the change in weather. Take good care.